Schiller stays. This is the one who said Juan needed a psychiatrist. Remember her? Or that the matter was between Juan and his psychiatrist. She stays. But Ellen Weiss, the one who actually did the firing, has resigned. The board nonetheless expressing confidence in Schiller and her leadership, saying it nonetheless expressed concern over her role in the termination process. And the board has voted that Vivian is not going to get her 2010 bonus. So no bonus. She keeps her job. And the one who actually pulled the trigger on Juan's firing, Ellen Weiss. Remember this? This woman refused to even meet with him. She fired him over the phone. She just called him up after 10 years of his employment there and said, "You're gone," for that comment. She's gone too. She's now resigned, apparently not faring well in connection with this review. More on this as we get it, and you can bet there's going to be reaction right here on Fox News, where Juan Williams is now a contributor at some point soon. Wow, here's a pivot for you. Speaking of problems in the media, Kelly's Court is back in session, and on the docket today, the veteran radio announcer for ESPN canned for making derogatory remarks to a female colleague. ESPN just fired Ron Franklin for comments he made to sideline reporter Gene Edwards in a meeting before the Fiesta Bowl. This was not on the air. This was off the air. Edwards now says that part of the exchange went like this. Okay, so this is the woman who was the target of the remarks. She says that Ron Franklin told her with a condescending tone when she tried to participate in a conversation he was having, quote, "Listen to me, sweet baby, let me tell you something." Edwards says she told Franklin not to address her like that, and she says Franklin responded with, quote, "Okay, then listen to me, blank hole." Except Edwards says that Franklin used the entire swear word. Now, you may remember that this is not the first incident between male and female employees of ESPN, and now there are suggestions that this is a workplace out of control. So let's talk about it with our panel. Trial attorney Lee Armstrong and criminal defense attorney Mark Eiglarsh. All right, Mark, let me start with you, because first I want to know whether this guy, Ron Franklin, has a potential argument that his firing was unjust because the allegations against him, and ESPN has, in a rare move, come out and said specifically why they were firing him, and they said it is based on what occurred last Friday. They're not saying the entire universe of Ron Franklin. They're saying it's based on what occurred last Friday, and what occurred last Friday is he allegedly called her sweet baby and then blank hole. Is that enough to fire a guy who's been with the organization for 2 decades?
Well, I don't believe it is. I think that an argument could be made that you could put on suspension like Tony Kornheiser was. Phillips was fired for having an affair. That's something. You know, that's a lot different than this. I think that it could have gone a little shorter than that, maybe a suspension, maybe some discussion that those phrases from the 1920s are not acceptable these days.
Sweet
That's
baby.
just my thought.
Yeah. Well, what about that? What about, he mentions Kornheiser, Lee.
Yeah.
And Kornheiser made these remarks. We have these, right, Deb? Checking in with my producer, Debbie McMillan. I think we've got this. This guy, Tony Kornheiser, came out and ripped on Hannah Storm, another ESPN reporter, and said the following. Listen to what he said, and he only got suspended.
Point out Hannah Storm in a horrifying outfit today. She's got on red go-go boots and a Catholic school plaid skirt, way too short for somebody in her 40s or maybe early 50s by now. And she's got on her typically very, very tight shirt, so she looks like she's got sausage casing wrapped around her upper body.
Oh.
That only warrants a suspension, according to ESPN, but this guy, Franklin, gets fired because of sweet baby and that other expletive.
Well, Kornheiser didn't say sweet baby. I mean, there's the difference between there's the difference
so
between
arbitrary.
That's true. That's bad.
Look, maybe it is. But the fact of the matter, here's what happens when something like this goes down. It starts to spread publicly. The CEO, the general counsel, they call out the outside lawyers. PR firms get involved, and then you sit down and you try to do what's best for the institution. And what's best for the institution may not insulate you all the time from lawsuits. But here, they looked at this guy, and you gave one account. I read other things, which is he said what he said, and she said, don't talk to me, and then he dropped the A-bomb.
Right.
And then in addition to that, he wasn't exactly contrite based on what I read, that they asked him to personally apologize to her, and he refused to do that. So you have to look at the totality of circumstances. If it's limited to that one line that you said, yeah, it seems pretty draconian. It certainly seems arbitrary. You can't see any pattern there or any policy. We also don't know what's in his written contract. So those are all questions that I'd like to know the answer to before I second guess what ESPN did here.
What I read, Mark,
did
and can I just tell our
apologize.
viewers, I just have a bit of a news headline I want to interject into Kelly's court, and that is we are connecting right now with Juan Williams, and he is up next right here after we wrap this Kelly's court. So let me just finish my debate with my panel as we get Juan connected, and then we'll get his reaction to the breaking news out of NPR. Mark, let me talk to you, because the reports I read were that actually this man did later apologize, or at least said he was willing.
Yes.
He was willing to,
No,
to
that's not what I
apologize.
read, right.
He was willing. He was willing to apologize to her later. But the truth is about this guy, Ron Franklin, Mark, is that apparently in 2005 he addressed another sideline reporter, Holly Rowe, as sweetheart during a game in a very pejorative way. It wasn't like, how you doing, sweetheart? It was like, let me explain something to you, sweetheart. This is how it works. I mean, the bottom line is that you put the evidence together, and this guy sounds like a bit of an A-bomb himself.
I am not defending his actions. I think there could have been a stronger choice in terms of the use of language. But did he deserve the death penalty? That's the question. A suspension? Perhaps. So, the ultimate sanction of losing his position? I don't know. I think there's more to this. He's been with them since 1987. Those comments are just not ones that typically you see firing.
Before I let you go, Lee,
Yeah.
the ESPN's taken a lot of heat as having a dysfunctional culture, as being, sort of this, frat house for guys making comments like this and so on. Yeah. Is this so unusual, or is this actually just a reality, sadly, of the workplaces out there?
Look, I can't speak to that, but I mean,
yes, you can.
Okay, then I will. It may be a reality at ESPN. This is, we've heard different incidents. ESPN is a male-dominated business. It's sports, so maybe there's an increase there. Or they're dealing with it more than other companies are dealing with it. But it's not so simple as you're making it out. I mean, they're trying to do the right thing. Again, they want to do the right thing for the organization. And they looked at this, and there are other incidents apparently, and they're saying, we can do nothing and we'll get publicly vilified for that. Or we can take this action and maybe still get vilified, but we're changing the course, we're changing the culture. Right. He can still sue, and maybe they have to defend against that, but that's the best for them.
In their
right
defense,
now.
they've sent a very clear message for the other on-air anchors
right.
now. All right, guys, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I'm going to skip the final word because I want to get to Juan Williams right now with a reaction now to the breaking news about the results of this independent board looking into his firing, and the news now that this Vivian Schiller, again, that this Vivian Schiller is going to lose her bonus, but that Ellen Weiss has apparently lost her job, or at least is now resigning in the wake of how she handled Juan's termination. Juan, your reaction to the news?
Well, I mean, I think it's good news for NPR if they can get someone who I think has been the keeper of the flame of liberal orthodoxy out of NPR. I mean, the idea that she was, someone who just had, I think, the executioner's knife for anybody who didn't abide by one single way of thinking, which was her way of thinking, Megan. And I think she represented a very ingrown, incestuous culture in that institution that's not open to not only different ways of thinking, but angry at the fact that I would even talk or be on Fox, angry at the fact that people have different perspectives and that a conservative perspective might emerge either on Fox or on NPR. So to my mind, this is good news for NPR, for people who care about news in America.
Juan, Ellen was the one, did I have my facts correct, that fired you, that actually called you up and without even agreeing to meet with you, fired you after 10 years?
That's right. Essentially called me a bigot for saying that I feared and felt when I am in airports and about to get on a plane and see people who are dressed in Muslim garb, a moment of anxiety about that presence, that statement, she said, was evidence of bigotry, that she felt that it was no longer any place for me because I had crossed the lines of her journalistic standards. I think what I crossed was her politically correct red line in the sand. And when I said to her, we can talk about this. Have you heard the whole interview? Have you heard the whole interview with Bill O'Reilly? She said she didn't need to hear anything else, review anything else. She said that there was nothing that I could say to her face-to-face that would change her mind.
And what about your reaction, Juan, to this, to Vivian Schiller, the one who suggested you needed a psychiatrist, to her staying on and the board expressing its confidence in her?
Well, that's up to them, and I had nothing to do with that investigation, Megan, because I felt like I didn't know if they were going to further defame me in order to justify their actions. I didn't have anybody representing me at the table, as you can appreciate as a lawyer, And I felt, you know what, better for me to keep my distance. I'm free to comment on what has happened now, but they've made their decision. They can live with it. All I'm telling you is that they've got a culture there that is not open to real news, that it's not open to all points of view, that's not open to the real world around us and to the many different dynamics and perspectives and life stories that animate the news in America.
Nonetheless, this Vivian Schiller has lost her bonus for 2010, Juan. That is in connection with how she handled your termination, since it was Ellen Weiss who actually pulled the trigger on the termination. And one can only assume that Ms. Schiller's comments about you and your need, in her view, for a psychiatrist may have played into that. Some feel somewhat vindicated by that.
You know, I'm going to try to stay away from bitter feelings, Megan, but I got to tell you that I thought it was a low blow for her. Not only that, I mean, there was a suggestion that I am such a weak-minded person that I needed a publicist to tell me what to say. Megan, you know me a long time. I don't think you ever thought, hey, Juan can't handle a conversation, can't put two words together. So the whole idea was to demean me, to make me appear as if I was not only a lunatic who needed a psychiatrist, but I was a loose cannon and not a professional news person.
How does NPR fare now, Juan? I mean, now that all's been said and done, this board's come out with its review and this is its decision. How do you think it rebuilds, if it does at all, the confidence of anybody in listening to NPR and trusting it for fair and balanced news?
They got to see what comes next, because what has happened in the past is that you had someone like Ellen Weiss there at the top of the news division, and she was pushing out anybody who had a different point of view about the world or the news or bringing different kinds of stories to the table. As I said, the institution has existed for, since the 1970s, and really started on college campuses as left-wing alternative radio. It has since grown into a major news institution in the United States. Ellen Weiss has been there that whole time, and she has kept along her pals, her friends, who all think alike. It's become highly ingrown, if not incestuous, in terms of their perspectives, and they protect each other, and they push everybody else out. You're not one of us. You're not one of the original team, and it goes to the point even of people who are young or people who are of different races. It is a very difficult environment in which to present and report the news. So the question is, do they simply go back and get someone else who also is part of that culture, or do they finally start to break out and acknowledge that, you know what, we have responsibilities to the wider world. We can't pretend that we're somehow special, that government funding through the member stations is going to protect us from what the world thinks and what the world views us to be.
Vivian Schiller says that right now they will have a person named Margaret Lowe-Smith who will step in temporarily as Ellen's replacement as they search for a more